This is a film that didn't quite make my top 6, but it was up there. And that movie is the 1982 film First Blood.
Nice.
Rambo.
First Blood.
First Blood.
Not Rambo. First Blood.
But a Rambo movie.
It has John Rambo in it.
We'll tell you how this goes.
I have not seen this.
Another one that
how they really screwed up the names.
Yes,
that is the most confusing saga ever. But
it makes no sense. So, First Blood, starring our favorite guy in the world, Sly Stallone, and this is coming right after he made Rocky 3. So Stallone's pretty cut. This is like getting into action star. This is what sets him off to be an action star. Before that, he was...
Yeah, real quick, just a quick history of Rocky and Sly Stallone. He was bulky and strong. By the time Rocky 3 hit, he weighed 145 pounds. Now, granted, this guy is like 5'8" on a good day. He's not a tall guy. But during Rocky 3, he was 145 pounds. And if you just look up Rocky 3 Stallone on Google, I mean, the dude is a V. I mean, his waist can't be much wider than that. It is abs, oil, the whole thing. So, yeah, he is not Rocky Balboa from 1 and 2. He is ripped Rambo.
He is cut. And, yeah, so this movie starts off his spree of action films. This is what makes Sly Stallone known for blowing stuff up. This film, when you hear First Blood and you think of Rambo, you're thinking, oh, he's putting the bandana on and he's running around blowing stuff up, which, yes, he does that in this movie. But the story in this movie is really, really deep, and it really hits home to, I think, a lot of people, especially veterans of Vietnam.
Absolutely.
The other Rambo movies are just a story and an excuse for him to blow people and things up. This one actually has a purpose. Like through the first, I mean, the explosion and stuff isn't what, the last 20 minutes of the movie, really?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a ton of action.
No. It's
to start off with.
He's home from Vietnam and he's trying to locate members of his platoon who have come back, and he's finding out that they're all gone. So he's got one guy that he wants to go visit, and he comes up to the house where this guy lives and his address, and he's like, hey, I'm looking for, I think it was Delmore Berry is his name, and he's talking to his wife, and he's like, he's not here. He died last year, cancer. And he's like, oh, man. So all of his buddies are gone, and he's walking into a town.
He's not driving. He's basically
he's a drifter.
Yeah. He's not like driving into town suitcases. He's got a backpack or a bag, and he's not carrying weapons or anything like that. He's
got his army jacket on, and he's walking.
A veteran who's just trying to find some friends.
That's it. So his buddy has died because of Agent Orange, is what ended up killing him, and he's walking into a town, and they're up in Washington. And of course you get the sheriff, the evil sheriff played by Brian Dennehy, pulls him over and says, what you doing? Dennehy. And he's like, I'm just, where are you heading? And he's like, I'm heading south. Well, where are you trying to get to? Seattle. Well, that's north. So it's like, where are you headed? And he's like, well, why are you pushing me, man? He goes, is there someplace I can get something to eat? And the sheriff's like, yeah. There's a town about 10 miles that way. You can go get something to eat there. We don't want you in our town. So he drives him outside of town, hops him out of the car, and says, don't come back here. And he pulls away. Well, Rambo's like, no, I'm going back in your town. So he starts walking. Well, then the sheriff arrests him. They send him they put him in the jail. They strip him. They're hosing him down, and now he's starting to have like flashbacks from Nam of being tortured because he was obviously a prisoner.
Yeah, he was a POW in Nam.
So
was his whole backstory in this. So.
Yeah, so he's basically having these flashbacks, and he takes out the entire police department and escapes on a motorcycle, and he heads into the forest, and the cops are giving chase.
When you say takes out, do you mean he killed them or he
No,
neutralized them?
he did not kill anybody. He broke this guy's nose. He knocked this guy down. He did not kill. He could have, because
I'm
he's a
pretty
Green
sure he didn't
Beret.
kill. I mean, a few people did go through windows.
Yeah,
So,
but he didn't kill anybody. They basically chase him into the woods, and he's constantly yelling out to these cops like, I didn't do anything. Like, I don't want anybody to be hurt. Just, basically, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I just wanted something to eat, and they just won't let it go. So he starts rigging up traps in the woods. He knows how to hunt. He knows how to be stealthy.
he was in
And
Vietnam, so he was a Green Beret in Vietnam, which means they just lived in the forest, the
yeah,
woods, and
he can
walk
hunt. And
around.
so he
Yeah,
basically sabotages everybody that comes up to get him. And at one point, he gets the sheriff with a knife to his neck and says, I could have killed every single one of you, but I didn't. Just let it go. Let it go. I'll go my way. You go your way. Let's stop this. Because one of the deputies fell out of a helicopter shooting at him, and they got turbulence, and he fell out. So now they think that Rambo killed this cop, and he's like, I didn't kill him. I don't want any more dead. I don't want anything. So as it turns out, they keep hunting him. They call in his platoon leader, Colonel Troutman, who tries to talk him into turning yourself in. And the colonel even tells the police, just let him go. You're going to pick him up in a couple of weeks in another town working at a car wash. Okay, let's just stop this. And that's where he gets that really great line, like, well, we're going to send, I don't know how many men up into the mountains. And Troutman's like, well, if you do that, just remember one thing. Make sure you send enough body
body
bags.
bags. Yeah,
Because he was trained to kill. This is what he will do to you if you send them up there. So just let him go and calm down. But they don't.
of
So
course.
Rambo heads back in. And this is at the end where he goes back into this town, and he just destroys this town. He blows up a gas station. He takes into a firearms store and he lights it all on fire. So it's just explosions. He's taking out the power of this town. And the only thing that he wants to do, though, is he just wants the sheriff. He doesn't want to hurt anybody else. He's after the sheriff. And he ends up shooting the sheriff. Sheriff doesn't die, but Rambo is prepared to make a stand. And Troutman shows up, and all the police are outside, and like the National Guard or whoever's there. And Troutman's telling him, it's over, Johnny. It's over. And this is where Stallone gives one of, I think, the best performances he's ever given. He goes into a rant about how nothing is over. I went and I fought for my country, and I come back here and people are spitting on me and they're calling me baby killers, and I can't even hold down a job. Like, I used to drive $1 million tanks, and here I can't even get a job parking cars. And so he starts going into, this is what it feels like to be a soldier. I fought in a war that a lot of people didn't agree with, but I was sent to do a job, and that's what I had to do. And now I come home, and I don't, like, this is how I get treated. I can't get a job. Nobody, I can't go into a town and get something to eat. He's getting bullied. He's getting ridiculed. He's getting spit on. He's getting called names. And it's like, he tells a story about how he and all of his buddies wanted to go riding in a car when they got back. They talked about all these things they were going to do when they got back. And they were in a bar in Vietnam, and this kid came up with a shoe shine box and was going to clean their boots. He got up to go get another beer, and by the time he could get back, that shoe shine box was rigged with a bomb, and it blew up. And he's holding pieces of his friend. And he goes, I can't get that out of my head. I close my eyes and I see that, and I can't get that out of my head. And he's talking about how every one of them's gone and he's got nothing. He was ready to die. This was basically him saying, I'm making my stand, and they're going to have to kill me because I don't want to go on like this anymore. I've had it. And I think there was an original ending where he actually did commit suicide. But the version that was released is Troutman was able to talk him down. He broke down and was crying. And Troutman's like putting an arm around him to kind of like comfort him. And then the movie ends with them walking out, and he's in police custody. So from that aspect of it, I think that's what makes this one of my favorite movies is I mean, it's got a lot of action in it, but the performance that Stallone gives and to see what it must have kind of been like for some of our veterans who came back from this war. I mean, it's a pretty emotional scene at the end of this movie.
Yeah, it's a big commentary on PTSD, mental illness, and things like that. Because remember, he was just this calm dude just walking through a town, but these cops wanted to be
Jerks.
yeah, thank you. Sorry, I almost said something else. These cops wanted to be jerks. So like Drew said, they're basically torturing him, and it just clicked something in his head. And all of a sudden he's not in a small town in Northwest America. It felt like he was in the Northwest. I don't know
Washington.
where they were.
Yeah.
Washington. He was? Sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, because it was overcast all the time, so I figured it was
Always.
Washington. But yeah, he's just some dude walking through a small Washington town, and all it took was just a couple things, and it just clicked. And he's no longer in Washington; he's in Vietnam. And to make a movie about that, and I love the fact that that movie was made because I've heard stories about that. I mean, if you look up Vietnam stories, that's what it is. That was like the worst time for us. I'm not saying the people that were against the war and spitting on I don't want to trash anybody or anything like that. I want to be positive, but I think they were so out of touch with reality that they didn't understand what these men were going through. And when they came back, all they thought of is what their friends told them, and they hear from these people and with these people, and they don't take into account what they had to go through. All they want to do is say like, "You're awful because of this."
Yeah, was there a draft for Vietnam? Did they even have a
Yes.
choice?
Oh yeah,
So they had
a
no
lot of them
choice.
didn't have a choice.
No.
Wow.
I want to say Vietnam was like the first and really only draft, right? They didn't draft during World War II. I think we had enough
we had
volunteers.
enlistment, yeah, but with Vietnam, and plus it drug on so long. I mean, really, it started. You had the Korean War, which was kind of like leading into it. Vietnam really started in the early '60s. That's when we started sending people, and then it just started getting bigger and bigger. And then they had the draft, and once you turned 18, you had to register for that draft.
Unless you went to college.
Unless you went to college, which is how my uncle didn't have to go.
That's why my dad did not go.
But my dad's number was probably getting pretty close because he turned 18 in '74, which is right at the very end of it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you had to go. And
UCF says there were 6 drafts. World War I and II are on there, Korean War, and Vietnam was the most recent.
Okay. I didn't think they would have to have done it for World War II, but
the first one was the American Revolutionary War, and the second was the Civil War.
I can see. Okay, I knew they had the draft in the Civil War. They actually talked about that in Gangs in New York. That's why they had those riots.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, it's just.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and the Vietnam War is so confusing. Like I have tried. I'm a history buff. I love this stuff, and I've tried to like figure out what were we doing. And I'm on the side that I'm one of those that probably thinks we probably shouldn't have been there. But at the same time, I see why we kind of had to be there. But you know what I mean? It's like one of those, because one side was going to go communist with Russia, and we had to be there to make sure that didn't happen. And I mean, this is all during the Cold War too, where we're fighting. Russia is getting involved, and it was a mess. And so I can see
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, it was a mess. So it's like part of me says, yeah, we probably really we shouldn't have gotten involved. But at the same time, we kind of had to get involved. It's just one of those things. And, and the soldiers who had to go over there and the stuff that they saw and things that they had to do, I can't imagine what that's like. And so for these soldiers to come home and not be welcomed home, and being called names and being spat on, and you can't hold a job because of this and that. You didn't have to go through that. You didn't have to deal with that. So how can you say that unless you've been there and you did that? And I think that's something that Rambo actually says in the movie. How can they say that unless they've been there and they've done what I had to do? How can they hold that against me like that? So yeah, I mean, it's horrible.
And I know that a lot of veterans, fireworks bother them. So 4th of July is a triggering holiday for them. Like for us, it's like, oh yeah, blow stuff up, throw fireworks. But to some of them, like that actually sets people into PTSD episodes.
Well, I
Yeah.
believe it. Yeah, 100%.
It's just
Yeah.
such a different mindset, like a thing we don't have to worry about, but it's just a totally different experience for them. So
Yeah. My brother was over in Iraq for a year. Luckily, he got out fine. A little bit of ear damage, but he came back pretty decent. No issues or anything like that. But a couple years later, we sat down, we talked for like hours. Just we lost track of time, and just to hear him talk about certain things and what he went through and what he went through when he got back. I mean, I think he hit a lot of things, and I don't, he was nowhere where Rambo is now, because Iraq, at least they had some idea of it was still pretty crappy, but
it was controversial too.
you didn't have to walk through a jungle.
Yeah.
He was, so that was the positive thing. So, but anyway, even like I said, 2 years, he was fine. He was Matt. He was my brother, and he still is today. But that night when we just sat there and talked for hours, and he went through things he struggled with, things that happened, friends that he lost. I mean, and he was National Guard. So he wouldn't, he joined the National Guard to help pay for college and ended up having to be a war veteran. So they show up the first day. They get on the truck and they're driving to the base. They get attacked. He loses 2 really good friends. I mean, he's there for an hour, and now he's lost 2 of his friends.
Wow.
It's something, and I'm getting a little preachy here, so I apologize, but Matt's the most important person in my life. So when I think about that, if you talk with veterans, realize who you're speaking with and be careful what you say, because, and I'm not saying that they're going to flip out and go Rambo on you, but it could trigger something that could bring on depression. It could bring on anger. It could just bring on sadness, and they're done for the rest of the night. And you don't hear from them because it triggered something like that. Because thank God I've never had to go, I've never had to deal with something like that, and pretty much probably won't have to. But there's no way for anybody who has not been over there. That's what makes that line so powerful. Nobody who has not put themselves in a pair of combat boots and picked up a gun and went to war should ever judge anyone who has risked their life for this country. Because whether you believed in the war or not, they were doing what they were told to do. They were following orders.
Yeah.
And whether it was wrong, whether it was right, they were doing what they were doing because they believe in this country. So every veteran out there who has ever done anything, whether they went over and just sat at the airport for a year and checked people in, that's still dangerous. You're in Iraq or Vietnam or wherever, so respect your veterans. And to any veteran watching right now, God bless you and thank you for everything you've done, because I can't even imagine something like that. And this movie points that out. And yes, everyone's heard the Rambo stories, and even part 2 has some sensitive moments. But by the time 3 and all the rest of them hit, it's just like, we need somebody to blow stuff up. Call Rambo. No, First Blood is a good movie. It is a strong, powerful movie about veterans, about PTSD, things like that, about how people can act in, because this takes place in a small town. And sometimes when you're in a small town, you get too comfortable, and it's like, this is how I'm want my town to be, and this is how it's going to stay. And we're not going to let. I don't know why I went into a southern accent there. They're in Washington, but this is how our town is. We don't want new people. We don't want change. We want this. So get me in. No, you can't be like that. You've got to be able to move along. Man, I've been talking for a long time. I can see that on the timeline now. So anyway, I'm going to stop, get off my soapbox. I'm going to let Drew talk about the movie a little bit more because that's what this is about. But again, veterans, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, Doug, you actually said it better than I could. So we'll take that. Nah, that's just one of the reasons that I think this movie is so high on my list is just because of that message and watching him struggle with these demons that he has and trying to overcome it. And like I said, I never served. I do have relatives who've served. And I've also noticed that a theme in my top 6 films so far have all kind of been war related.
A little bit, yeah.
I didn't plan on this. The next one is not war related, but it still ties into this one in some way.
So it's Star Wars, right?
Yeah, we'll get to those. No, it's just I think this is one that I think people would be surprised when they watch it, because again, you hear Rambo. It's not that. It is
not. Yeah, and that I was going to point that out. I think I mentioned it. Do not look for Rambo.
No, you want First Blood.
Because that's where it gets confusing, because
these names.
I love this breakdown. So the first movie starring John Rambo was called First Blood. The second movie was called Rambo. First Blood Part 2. The third one was called Rambo 3. They dropped the First Blood. But technically, it's the second Rambo.
It's Rambo 2 First Blood Part 3.
Yes. But they call it Rambo 3.
Right.
The next one they called John Rambo. And then the last one they just called Rambo.
So there you go.
So there's like 5 movies, and none of them are numbered properly or anything. But
no reboots?
When it comes down to it, First Blood.
First Blood. That's all
all you need to know.
Just watch that one.
So this is the very first one.
Very first one.
Very first.
And it's not like the other ones. This one's a little bit more dramatic.
This is a movie. The rest of them were cash grabs. No offense, Sly. Loved all the movies, but you know it for a fact. The first one was a movie. It was a story. The second one, they brought in a little bit of a story, but threw in a lot more action. By the time you were fighting the Russians, you were making jokes in caves. And you fought with the Taliban. So
did that too.
Yeah, in Rocky 3, he was allied with the Taliban.
Yeah.
Now, that was the 80s.
Yeah.
When they were helping us.
You said Rocky Rambo 3.
Oh, did I? Sorry.
Yeah, you said Rocky 3. Rocky 3?
Right?
Rambo 3.
You fought Clubber Lang.
Rambo 3. Yeah. No, I won't. We'll go deep into that.
The strange thing is they made a kid's cartoon based off of Rambo, and it was basically off of like Rambo 2.
No way.
It was a kid's cartoon. They had action figures. I had one.
Oh yeah.
They
Video
would never
games
do that today. They
made a kid cartoon off a rated R movie.
And what was crazy was the lady was in it.
Yeah, she was in it. Yeah.
Yeah, she got killed in part 2.
Yeah, and then they brought in some new characters, and Colonel Troutman was there, but they brought in some other characters. But it's like, you're making this off a cartoon of a movie that kids can't watch.
But we did.
We did, but you're not going to.
And we watched the cartoon. It wasn't good. It didn't last more than 2 seasons.
No, it's like, how do you market? There's a movie of Rambo blowing people's heads off, and here's a cartoon of him saving nature.
Yeah, I mean, they had trouble merchandising Batman movies, and they didn't have a problem with Rambo. Like that's
Rambo was fine.
There are
this is the 80s. This is the 80s, though. We didn't care.
There are barely any action figures for like Batman Forever, because Batman Returns made kids cry, and one of the Nolan movies too didn't have very many action figures.
No.
Nobody wanted to pick it up because they were like, oh, this is not kid appropriate.
They didn't have action. They had a little bit of action figures for like the Indiana Jones movies for the first movie, and then they stopped. for some reason.
The skulls.
They probably didn't want to make monkey brains
Right.
toys.
But
for
Rambo
cartoon.
with a machine gun, and he's got all of his marks on his body from where he's been like beaten and whipped. They're all over his body.
Oh, well, I mean, come on. I mean, look at G.I. Joe.
It's like, holy crap.
You know, I mean, that cartoon, that's all it was people flying around and shooting laser guns. No one ever got hit. The planes did, but
yeah, they were lousy shots.
Yeah.
It's weird when I see kids dressed up as Freddy Krueger, because it's like, if you know what the character is and what he's known for,
that's probably more the parents pushing.
Really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, my kids know who Jason Voorhees is because I love Friday the 13th movies, but I've never let my kids watch them. They know who Jason is, but I'm like, yeah, you're not quite ready to.
Yeah,
it's not because
10 years.
Yeah, and it's not because of the gore, because you can tell the gore is fake, and it's not because of the swearing. They've heard that in other movies. There's another element that I don't think they're quite ready to watch yet. I don't want to have that talk yet.
Boobies.
Well, this was a good pick, and I've never seen a Rambo movie, but I'm intrigued. So, especially about like a theme I see is what happens to someone when they see the dark side of the world, right? How bad things can really get here. And I think, I've never seen anything like what Rambo would have seen, but if I wanted to experience that and try to have some compassion for what he went through, it seems like a movie would be the best way to kind of dip your toe in the water and try to understand that. But I think we all know, like, once something really tough happens to you in life, like, it changes how you see the world. And, I don't know how you could see some of the things like a veteran sees and be okay. So I think that's an interesting thing to think about, how tough things can get. And, maybe that makes the rest of us want to help make the world a better place. I don't know, but or at least have compassion for those who are going through stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
So,
well,
good choice.
Thank you. So
good conversation.
That's
I
guess
4.
4.
That was your number 4. Kind of.
Well, kind of my number 4. Number 4 is Ghostbusters.
Honorary number 4.
This is my honorable mention, First Blood. So I've got number 3 coming up next, and I promise this is not a war movie. However, it kind of ties into this film because of one of the songs in it, which is actually called War.
What is it good for?
Rush Hour.
Actually,
good God, y'all.
Actually, I take that back. The song isn't called War. There is one, but it's in a different one. It's in a sequel. Yeah, you can figure it out. You'll have to check back to see. That's my next one.
I got no guess.
I was joking about Rush Hour, by the way.
Well, thanks everybody for watching. If you like this video, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. That'll help us grow this channel and make more spiritual movie reviews. So we will see you next time.
Later.